Okay, so good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Every Day is Earth Day webinar series hosted by Emerald Built Environments. Today, we will be talking about how to fast-track LEED for your building, and our focus is going to be LEED O&M. My name is Michael Fodor. I'm a project manager here at Emerald, primarily LEED multifamily certification projects, but today I am doubling as your webinar leader. In the spirit of Groundhog Day, we wanted to allude to that. If you do the same thing over and over again, you can't expect different results. So today we wanted to explore how LEED O&M can help make shifts towards a sustainable future. A few housekeeping slides to start with. Please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A feature during the presentation, and we have some time carved out to get to them at the end. We are recording this webinar and we will make it available to all registered participants. So today, our host is founder and managing member of Emerald Built Environments, Laura Steinbrink. Laura has an unparalleled understanding and passion for sustainability and how we can all make a difference in the design, construction, and operation of all building types, including how to leverage sustainability to improve ESG performance. You were in luck as well, as today we are also joined by Sophia Hestad, a project engineer at Emerald. Sophia is our subject matter expert for LEED operations and maintenance, the rating system that we're going to be talking about today. She recently completed a fast-tracked LEED O&M project for an Oracle facility in the UK, which achieved LEED Gold. And I will go ahead and turn it over to Laura.
Thank you so much, Michael, and it's great to be here with all of you today. So just a quick overview about Emerald Built Environments. We are a sustainability consulting firm, and our goal is to help owners set and achieve their sustainability goals, helping to develop a sustainable future. 2030 is an important year for those who are practicing sustainability. There are obviously global metrics to help us reduce our carbon emission by that time. And Emerald has set its own goal that by 2030, we will have enhanced 2030 sustainable environments. And we're well on our way, celebrating 1,443. So in today's session, we are here to talk about LEED operations and maintenance. Sometimes you hear it called LEED O&M, LEED EB-O&M, LEED EBOM. It all means existing buildings, operations, and maintenance. And what we want to do today is give you an understanding of the O&M rating system, some key tools for how to measure performance, explore what the gap analysis process is that Emerald does with its clients in order to help them set and achieve their goals to O&M certification, and then to take your questions. So Sophia and I are going to have a conversation with each other as we go through this presentation, and we invite you again, as Michael said, to put your questions in the Q&A. So let's get started. From the top, when Emerald engages with a client, we do four things. We're always listening and strategizing first. So one of the ways we get clients to understand the opportunity around O&M certification is to listen to what their overall corporate or organizational goals are. Increasingly, especially in the private sector, companies who are pursuing ESG or who might have participation in the global economy in a supply chain, specifically automotive or aerospace, for example, have goals that require them to have sustainable performance measured by their carbon emissions or their environmental impact. And O&M is a great tool for that. Then we get our hands dirty. We go to work evaluating and planning where the organization is in its journey and in its processes and its performance, particularly important for O&M. We implement what we decide needs to be done. And then at the end of the day, we're testing and measuring. Test and measure in this conversation really means measure performance and make sure we're on track and improving over time to meet those goals. So Sophia, do you want to give our listeners today an overview of LEED and the different rating systems?
Sure. So LEED has 4 different rating system categories in general to kind of help categorize based on large building differences or where a building is at in its life cycle. So at the top, you'll see building design and construction is usually for all the new construction, but also for any major rehab. If large portions of the building are being recompleted, then they would pursue under building design and construction. Under there as well, they're also able to pursue schools, which schools have specific needs, as well as retail and hospitals. Those all kind of break out into needing specific either credits or differences in how they pursue the credits. And then you'll see existing buildings, operations, and maintenance. This could also include interior spaces, but this is more for the buildings that are already under operation. They might be only 1 year old, or they could be over 100 years old. So buildings that want to improve their operations and, like Laura mentioned, start tracking their performance would pursue under operations and maintenance, and we'll dig into that today. There's also commercial interiors. So an office space that might be a tenant in a building can also pursue LEED. And finally, homes have their own LEED certification. Again, a unique building type compared to the rest with its own requirements.
Awesome. And like in every single one of these building certifications, there are what we call prerequisites, which are required. If you don't do them, you're not getting certified, period, end of story. Then there are optional credits, which are worth points. In O&M, there are some that are tracking related and some that are design related. Now, we told you this is about operations and maintenance. So when we say design, it might mean, is it there or not there today? But in order to achieve certification, every project must achieve at least 40 optional points, and then higher certification levels, silver, gold, and platinum, accordingly by the number of points that are achieved. And O&M is different in how those points are collected. Sophia, back to you.
So for LEED EBOM, as I usually refer to it, again, existing buildings, operations and maintenance, this is for those existing buildings or even the interior lease spaces in an existing building. At any one time, you are able to have less than 50% of that space under construction. So the key here is that less than 50% can be renovated. Greater than that would push into that major renovation category, which we saw in the last 2 slides. So LEED EBOM is more of a performance driven, not documentation driven. There is a handful of policies and documents that have to be completed, but the great driving factor behind this rating system within LEED is the software and tracking tools that show the actual performance. We have a large quantity of existing buildings and infrastructure that we'd like to reuse. And so how, without knocking it down and building new, can we evaluate how the performance is as is, and how do we improve in a realistic manner based on the existing limitations of the building? So in order to pursue this LEED rating system, you must collect 12 months of utility data. So that's where a new construction building a year later could start to pursue LEED EBOM once they get that 12 months of data collected. This can be helpful as well to try and track, building was designed a certain way. Is it performing the way that it was intended? And the last nuance of LEED EBOM is that it does have to recertify every 3 years, which is different from other LEED rating systems currently.
So before we hop to the next slide, a thought just popped in my head that, oftentimes we meet projects that are at 100% CDs or even just started construction. And then for whatever reason, just now the right people are being asked the question, should we pursue LEED certification? And in the BD and C world, if it's a major renovation or new construction, that's a no, right? You had to have been involved in the process earlier. But that's a time when, if you're a little, what we would call late to the game, where you've got a major project happening, you can immediately start adopting the principles in EB O&M and then pursue certification 1 year after the building's opened, right?
Absolutely. And that might even be a benefit for certifying under O&M with that, previous thought ahead of that 12 months as they're wrapping up that construction process. They know and have time to make improvements, or at least see where those performance-driven points are coming out to. So like this presentation is the fast track, but the more time they have to prepare and kind of watch their performances scores, they're able to improve and see how that is going to translate into their LEED certification level.
Right. So let's get into O&M. What are all of the parts that make up this certification?
Yeah, so Emerald has kind of broken it down into 8 different chunks to think about. They all intertwine and have connection, but this is how we present it to clients to make it more attainable. So there are the prerequisites that Laura mentioned. These are required. There's no way around them for any rating system in LEED. And so these are specific to existing buildings. So some of those you might need to conduct something like an ASHRAE audit or adjust some water fixtures if you're not meeting the requirements or your practices. But again, prerequisites are required in all LEED, and usually these are relatively attainable through the O&M certification. Next at the top is the ARC score. So ARC is really the platform, which I think we'll dig into more, of the O&M rating system. So USGBC has developed this software that helps compare buildings around the world and see how they are performing against each other. And this is helping drive that performance driven. There are facts we know about how certain building types and age should perform, but how do we keep driving that marker forward? And so ARC score will include things like transportation surveys, occupancy comfort surveys, as well as energy, water, and waste performance. So then there are optional credits on top of this. So ARC score will help give you some of your prerequisite points as well as additional points, but there are usually 10 optional credits beyond that, which could help improve more of your practices in your building and also help improve the level of LEED that you attain. Then, like I mentioned, there is the policy requirements. So the ARC score is kind of the result of those policy requirements. The better implemented, and the policies are really just outlining goals, their procedures and practices. And so the further along those get through implementation phase, the better your ARC scores should turn out. Then at the bottom, we'll see the survey requirements. Again, those connect into ARC, but that usually is something business owners want to know is what surveys will need to be sent out. And ARC provides the link to that. So it's super simple in 2 questions, but that is for both transportation and occupancy comfort in the building. The tracking requirements, these can relate both to energy, water, and waste, but again, there's some optional credits that also require tracking, such as your purchasing. You know, what comes into your building really impacts what goes out in your waste. The performance requirements, again, that's the base level minimum. So LEED O&M has prerequisite minimum number of points that you have to earn through ARC, which is kind of different than any other LEED rating system. Prerequisites don't earn points, but those minimum performance requirements will have to be hit for all projects. And finally, those design decisions, which you don't have to be renovated your building, but what is the current design? What kind of refrigerants are already in the building? And perhaps what is your plan to remove or improve your systems as they reach their end of life?
So before we go to the next slide, I just wanted to stick on a couple things that you said. Optional credits, there's 10 in O&M.
Yes.
So anyone who is participating in this webinar who might be familiar with BD and C, where there are many, many more than 10. This is one of the reasons why Emerald always tells people O&M is approachable. You get your ARC score and then you have 10 things to decide. It's not
Yes.
many, many more things to decide. And the other thing I wanted to have you talk about again, because I know we're not going to dive into it on another slide, is the survey requirements. I know when we consult with the companies, sometimes, especially the bigger they are, there's this like panic that looks over their face, and corporate communications is involved. And oh my gosh, what are we asking people? And literally panic. So tell us again, what are the 2 questions that get asked of staff or building occupants?
Yeah, so all regular building occupants are part of that denominator for the survey requirements. Usually it's about a 25% response rate that's required, depending on the number. The larger the building, the less responses you need percentage-wise. But there's 2 questions. The first one is transportation. And so a lot of business owners do get worried about that one because they don't want to have personal information out there about employees. Really, all you're answering is no names, no certain locations, just how many miles am I commuting to work every day, and by what type of method. So the answers range anywhere from walking, biking, public transportation, up to carpool or single car, and then is that car electric or gas powered? And so there's nothing specific that goes in. It's one question that says, how far did you travel today and by what method of transportation? So that one's usually pretty easy, and there's really no data going into it besides what are your emissions based on how far and by what method you travel. And the second question is for occupancy comfort, which again makes people nervous because they don't want to hear bad feedback. Usually we end up having surprisingly good results. So building owners tend to be happy with what they hear. But it's asking the question, a smiley face scale of, are you happy or upset or neutral with the environment that you're in? And then from there, based on the smile or the frown or neutral, it will just list about 8 checkboxes. Why is it that you are happy or sad? Is it well lit? Is it clean? Or if you slide to the sad face, is it dirty? Do you not see any natural light? Is it stuffy? Are you too hot? And so offices, sometimes people get nervous about how employees will answer. You know, you'll always have someone who's too cold or too hot. But again, that's why LEED requires this minimum response rate, is because it's averaging and collecting that bigger database of information. And again, nothing specific going in about the employee or where they sit or how to track back who had a positive or negative response. It's just trying to get that overall feel. Are people content, or is there a large issue with the building?
Awesome. So I'm going to speed us along. I love this slide. The ARC score is just so fun for me. So tell us what goes into ARC, which you said is the data collecting software platform that LEED uses for O&M.
Yeah, so there's 5 categories that go into ARC: energy, water, waste, transportation, and human experience. So that transportation and human experience are both those surveys we just discussed. The human experience hits 20 points, half of that based on the survey and half based on your air testing. That's for both CO2 and TVOC. But then to go back up to the energy, water, and waste, these are your utilities. And waste is often not thought of as a utility, but you can get it tracked monthly in some locations by your waste hauler. If not, you would conduct a one-time waste audit each year or every 3 years, depending on how you decide to pursue ARC and LEED recertification. But tracking your energy and water, it's doing 50% of the calculation based on your energy use intensity, that's per square foot of your building. And the other half of it is based on per occupant. So there was a large, people came out of the offices during COVID, and that showed up on one of our projects recently. So you have to kind of account for the times and is this the normal occupancy rate or not? But that helps balance out a building of the same size with half the occupants or double the occupants is going to use a lot more or less energy, water, and waste compared to the next.
Right. And one thing about ARC for people who maybe have been tracking their energy and water over time and using Energy Star Portfolio Manager, there's a great plugin that you can just link these two together. So if you're already in a 2030 district and participating in ESPM any other way, you can just link these two together and it feeds the utility data right over to ARC. So nobody has to retype anything, right?
Yep.
And it's free, right? Anybody can establish an ARC connection now, right? Like,
yeah, ARC is free, and then you could use it and track it for a few years before you decide to pursue LEED. But they do want the platform to be available to all people because it's such a helpful resource.
Right. Okay, so let's dig in a little bit on the prerequisites and the policies. Tell us about these.
Yeah, so the performance prerequisites, again, include those surveys, the transportation, the minimum water performance and energy performance. So there's a certain points that they convert to. I think it's about 6 and 13 that you have to meet for water and energy. But essentially, again, it's saying there is a baseline number for the energy and water use intensity per square foot and per occupant that a building should have, and any performance above that would earn you those additional points. The refrigerant design and CFC elimination, it is possible in older buildings, especially, these existing longer term buildings can have CFC still in there, but it's growing more unlikely, as those were banned more than a few years ago now. So the refrigerant design has the ability to earn one of those optional credits. But if your building would have CFCs, you don't have to remove them immediately. That's where you would write that design plan for, as they reach their end of life, how you will replace them. And you can't purchase CFCs anymore, but what you intend to replace them with. The waste diversion, again, that can be done two ways. One is that monthly waste hauler tracking. We're really looking at total waste created and then how much of that was recycled or diverted. Composting counts. It's not just your recycling that goes into your paper plastic bin. There's other ways to divert waste. That also includes electronic waste and things like lamps in the building, making sure that they're going to the places that they should be when they reach their end of life. Then the minimum indoor air quality performance, again, you're available for 5 points for your CO2 testing in the building. So the more outdoor air you're bringing in, the better that will score. And then the TVOC, so that's your total volatile organic compounds. For those familiar with the LEED, B, and C rating, that has more to do with what are the products, and then as well, like what's the ventilation in your building to kind of remove those TVOCs from the space. And finally, that indoor air quality performance is from the survey for that more about occupant comfort, as I call it. So the policies which are required, and there's a few additional that could reach optional points, but at a bare minimum, everyone has to complete a sustainable purchasing policy. The driving factor behind this is both to make sure what you're purchasing is better for the environment, but also being mindful of the practices of your purchasing. The more you bring into the building, the more you will have in your waste diversion of that total. So we got to start from the beginning and what are we buying that's eventually going to have to leave our building. Then the facility renovations, again, up to 50%, or even if you are doing greater, this is kind of that crossover between LEED, building design, and construction. So if you are going to complete a renovation or even just painting a room, giving it some fresh upgrades, making sure you're looking for those product material health reports to make sure that it's healthy both for the occupants and the environment. No smoking. This is to make sure, there's no smoking in the building, but more importantly, that if there is designated smoking areas, that they're 25 feet from the building entrances, just to make sure that that air coming in can still achieve that air quality, which we were talking about in the performance section. And then lastly, required for the policies is green cleaning. A lot of cleaning products have a lot of chemicals that aren't so good for the occupants. And so this is creating, again, the goals and the practices to eventually swap out your cleaning products and also use maybe less water or less energy for the cleaning practices the way you're doing it.
So I'm watching our Michael's notes to us, and we're being chatty today, as we said we would be. So we're bumping up against our Q&A time, but let's get through, because we haven't yet talked about the gap analysis. So let's try to get through these. And to anyone else who's on the webinar, we signed it up for 30 minutes. You will get a copy of it. We can stay on longer to take Q&A, but let's get to the gap analysis and tell them what you do, Sophia.
Yeah, so in that phase 1 gap analysis, this usually takes about 2 months with Emerald. That's where we bring clients on to see where are you currently, what kind of documentation or performance data do you have? Provide us things like utility bills, your current green cleaning policies or cleaning policies in general. Who do you use as your provider? And so we create a chart that really, in a report, shows them how attainable and in what kind of time frame maybe would they be available to reach certification.
The chart's on the next one, but let's just do this one really quick, because it's kind of what you said, but let's say it again quick.
Yeah, so during that gap analysis, we'll go through the software. We'll set you up in ARC. If you already have ESPM, that Energy Star Portfolio Manager, we'll help connect that to ARC, and it's a one-time setup, super easy, and then forever on. The data just needs to be entered in one place, which is great. We'll align those prerequisites, review what you have, maybe what you don't have, conduct some preliminary calculations to give you a better idea of what points you might achieve, and then do a stakeholder engagement, goals, timelines, budgets. This helps kind of refine that scorecard and help establish what threshold of certification might you want and what kind of timeline that might take to achieve.
Right. So in about 2 months, through a couple of conversations, we come back to our clients, right, with a report and the next 2 slides, and then we're done and getting ready for questions, Michael. Give really 2 different things. Like you said, we, do the analysis of what's happening, and then we present the prerequisites and optional credits back to them in this sort of red light, green light fashion of you're good to go, or we've got a little bit of work to do, maybe more investigating or assessing needs to take place to be clear. And then if we know for sure it's a issue, definitely needs dug into, it might get a red. But from this, it's right, clients can see right away what they need to do, and they've got an action item, and they can figure out what steps they might want to take in order to move to the next stage, right?
Yep.
And then talk to us, Sophia, about this, which is an example of how we dig into one of the prerequisites and credit points.
Yeah, so we'll kind of put right there in the bullet points in the middle, more of the details about how the credit is pursued and what points are available. But really to focus in that bottom corner, we put in the ARC scores if we're able to predict them, usually more for energy and water, possibly waste. But this one on this project, they had not done a transportation survey. So we were unable to predict the ARC score. So our next steps were to conduct that ARC survey during the official performance period. And we listed out, if this was a school project, both students and staff will need to be included and meet the minimum response rate. So, we're giving a very clear directive and trying to be very concise with what is the thing that the building owner or project team needs to do next in order to keep moving forward and better clarify the points that they will earn.
Awesome. So I think that brings us to Q&A. Michael, do we have any questions from the audience?
Yeah. So thank you so much, Laura, Sophia. That was an amazing presentation, very informative. We do have one question here that has come in. Sophia, you mentioned earlier in your remarks that O&M is available for leased spaces. Just wanted to expand on that if you could tell us a little bit more about leased spaces versus owned, and anything else that might be unique about a leased space.
Yeah, so interiors is what LEED calls it instead of existing buildings, since you just have that lease space on the interior of a building. They have removed in that version of the scorecard, there's no sustainable sites credits. And that's because in theory, if you are a leased space within a building, you do not necessarily have control. Maybe you can influence, but you don't have control over that site that it's located on or making changes to it. So that's the major difference. And so those points end up coming out back to you as optional credits in the purchasing and green cleaning optional credits. Interiors are able to earn more points through those, but otherwise it's really the same for both existing buildings and interiors, which is kind of nice for consistency to just walk through all those same ARC scores. You do have to be sub-metered as kind of the one nuance of how interior spaces would need to make sure that they're able to get their energy and water data even from their single tenant space in a building.
Great, excellent. Thank you very much for that one. One other question that has come up and does come up frequently when we're talking about certification projects: how much does it cost? A, and then part B, what is the value? This could be for Sophia or Laura, either of you. How much does it cost, and what is the value to the project of going through this process?
You want to take costs, Sophia?
Sure. So it is a $1,200 registration fee, as it is for all LEED projects. That's the discounted rate if you work with a USGBC member like Emerald. But then the minimum starting point is $1,140 for any building that's up to 250,000 square feet. The one nice part about LEED O&M compared to other rating systems is there's no split review. This is a single review. So it'll just be that $1,200 and then the $1,140 or increase from there based on your square feet.
Right. Awesome. And then on a value perspective, I have several things to say, but knowing that we're at a little bit of time and there might be more questions, I would say the following. A third-party designation of your performance speaks to your stakeholders, and increasingly stakeholders are requiring the companies that they work for, that they shop at, or that they do business with to demonstrate performance. So first and foremost, it's a noted, very brand, familiar designation. The second thing is, especially for companies that are pursuing ESG initiatives, this is an amazing way to engage the team. As you saw what some of those policies, which I do want to restate, and we often have to say this to our clients, LEED calls them policies. They are procedures. They are goal documents. They are not something that the law department needs to review. It's like, we're going to purchase sustainable products and we have a goal that 80% of them will meet the sustainable requirements. We have a green cleaning policy, which is a standard operating procedure of how we're going to purchase equipment and products to clean the office and the methodologies of the cleaning. So anyways, it's a stakeholder driven initiative that engages many parts of an organization, and especially through the surveys, the users of the building, which is a great way to improve engagement, make people happy, feel more connected with the values and the work that the companies do. And then the whole ARC platform is a great tool for the facilities department or the accounting department to use to easily translate how much you spent on the utility bill into what your performance is and to know your environmental impact.
Great, thank you so much for that. I think we are at time, but I want to do two more questions really quickly. Laura, you mentioned the policies and the surveys in that last answer. Where can I go to see what an example of what those policies might be?
Oh, that's a great question. So first of all, they're free on the internet, but the easiest way to do it is to email Sophia or me, because we have bundled them all together in a document and we'll be happy to send them to anyone if you want to see the templates. And they're really simple. You can copy, save as, and change the names of the people responsible for the different parts and put them into motion right away.
Great. Well, that is very helpful. And then finally, a final question that we did receive is, so we've gone through this process, we're measuring our performance. What happens if for some reason our performance drops out of the required range after we're certified? What would next steps look like in that situation?
Yeah, so if you were working with Emerald, we'd ask that you reach out, and we also will get updates through ARC on how your building is performing. But really, if you dropped below the minimum performance requirements, that's probably a good indication that there's an issue going on within your building. It's less likely that over time your building is just suddenly consuming large amounts of water. But if it did happen, Emerald can come in and kind of help address or identify what that issue is. If it comes to more of the surveys and things like that, we can look into those policies and try and help guide more, again, those goal documents as Laura's describing them. How do we better address them or move forward in these practices? Because again, those goals are what will translate into those ARC scores. So we'd be happy to help out. It's usually, more stagnant, and how do we keep driving forward to improve and overall ARC translate into reducing that overall greenhouse gas emissions for the building.
Great. Well, thank you very much for that. So we are unfortunately out of time. We're over time a little bit, so apologies for that, and thank you for staying with us. Please feel free to reach out to our speakers, Laura or Sophia. Contact information on the screen there with any additional questions that you may have. And thank you once again for joining today's webinar. This wraps up our series, but please stay tuned for more webinars and educational opportunities as we get into 2023. So thank you, Sophia. Thank you, Laura, and everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.